Welcome to the Arcdox podcast. This podcast features discussions from leading industry professionals regarding building information modelling and digital construction. If you enjoy this podcast, or if you would like us to feature a specific topic, please let us know in the comments section of our social media platforms. You can also check out our website at www.arcdox.com for more information.
Welcome back to the Arcdox podcast. This is episode 5. Today we're joined with Malachy Mathews, we're joined with Pat Slattery, and we're also joined with Jerry O'Carroll. Hi Malachy, how are you?
Great, and thanks very much lads for the invitation to come out and have the chat.
Yeah, you're more than welcome, Malachy. It's delighted to have you here.
Good to have you here. Yeah. Let's have some interesting discussions around BIM and education.
Yeah.
It's get some blockchain as well. You never know.
It tends to enter the conversation around me, all right, you know. So no, I'd be delighted to.
I suppose just to kick off, just to introduce yourself, you know what your background is and how you've come to be where you are in terms of BIM and the BIM space.
I've had a pretty, I suppose, eclectic 36-year career now at this point in design and construction. And the foundation of that would have been the technician diploma in architecture, which I did from Bolton Street. Qualified in 1982. And 1982, God, there was a serious recession on then as well, you know. And I think 29 of us qualified. Within 4 weeks, 25 of them had left the country. So that's how bad things were then. I stuck around and spent a couple of years picking up a little bit of work here, a little bit of work there, a couple of weeks here, a couple of months there, all of that. But I suppose rather than go into detail of all the various different jobs that I have done over the years, we'd be here all afternoon just talking about that. My career, I suppose, has been in 3 kind of sections. So I've had 3 career changes, you could put it that way, in that time. And the first one was, I suppose, when I stumbled and fell into construction, more or less taking up an opportunity that was there because the architectural world was more or less dead at that time. And I went working for a main contractor and spent 10 years, roughly 10 or 11 years at that, between working in the UK and here on heavy civil engineering jobs, kind of bridge construction, road, motorway construction, infrastructure projects, things like that. Well, that was brilliant. It was really interesting. You know, building is building, and whether it's below the ground or above the ground, you learn an awful lot about people and materials and techniques and management and money, and the importance of good communication in terms of the design and the contractor. So that was really interesting to see things from the contractor's point of view. Around mid-1990s, 1996, 97, I finished in contracting and decided to get back into architecture as things had picked up a bit. I had done a couple of CAD courses with one of the contractors I was with, and I took like a duck to water to that, really enjoyed that. I think it was that actually that encouraged me to get back into the architecture field. So I worked in the design offices for about another 10, 11 years or so, ending up as the chief technician in the architects department in Fingal County Council. And while I was there, I went to a presentation. Rita Corrigan at the time gave a presentation, one of the very first presentations on Revit, and as soon as I saw that, I saw here we are in for another paradigm change without a doubt. So I started to follow that up. Cormac Allen, who was the head of the Architectural Technology department in DIT, spotted the fact that I had this expertise in the whole area of digital technologies and things like that. So I did 1 year's part-time teaching on the Architectural Technology course, and through a set of circumstances, a position opened up and I applied for it and I got the job. And so the third career change happened in 2007, and I went in full-time teaching in the Architectural Technology program in DIT, where I am today and where I hope to finish.
Well, I hope you'll be there for a few years longer now.
I think working in construction is quite interesting. I think that's something that every technologist should look to do at some point during their career, is to get out onto sites and work for a contractor. And see how things really happen.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It brings huge benefits. You know, if you think about it this way, when we're designing buildings and detailing buildings, it's somewhat abstract because it was pen on paper, it was mouse and monitor to begin with. But when you get out and feel concrete, I mean, you're working with steel fixing gangs and concrete gangs and things like that, it becomes very real to you very, very quickly. So that was a brilliant experience to take into it. I heard Will talk on your last podcast and his background, and he was lucky in the sense that he got that opportunity to be able to do that. I don't think it's necessary for every AT to go out onto site, but I certainly think anyone who does will derive enormous benefit from that.
And in terms of bringing BIM into DIT or TU Dublin, as it's now called, what's your experience been in terms of its acceptance and
Well, that's a good story. So I'm quite happy to tell that story. So I arrived in 2007, and knowing that Revit was on the horizon, and I was in there to teach CAD, but I started to drop in Revit lessons as well. Keeping one chapter ahead of the students. That was as far as we were getting those days. But it was becoming pretty obvious to me, and very obvious to me, that this was our future. And Revit and BIM is a really hand-in-glove fit with the architectural technologist, more than any other profession out there. So I started to make my views known amongst my own colleagues, and it was me. I called the very first call to arms, if you like, in Bolton Street. I sent out an email and asked people, anybody who was interested in BIM, to come to a meeting to see what we could maybe do in order to progress that, and about 13 people turned up. So that was encouraging for starters, and they were from various different departments and schools. From there, I did the very first BIM presentation in Bolton Street. It was the Hewlett-Packard lecture series, and it was the first time an awful lot of people ever heard Revit or BIM. So again, that was very informative. And then I organised a symposium in which I persuaded heads and assistant heads of schools of electrical, mechanical, architecture, engineering to come along and to talk about how they were going to implement BIM within their programmes. And that was a seminal moment, I think, within the whole development of BIM within DIT. I wouldn't say I was the very first. I was certainly the first person to push it. Dr. Maurice Murphy, who's since retired, did a PhD thesis using ArchiCAD to produce, I suppose, historical artefacts, you could say, which would have been columns and column heads and that type of thing, from old pattern books that he found. And so that was interesting. That was a very localised study. It wasn't brought out. So I can honestly say that I'm one of the main reasons why BIM happened within DIT. It was always going to happen, but it happened in the way that it did because of the work that I did within there. So I designed the first 6 BIM modules which were embedded into the architectural technology program, and they became a mainstay of that program. That was the first time to do that, and I delivered those. Out of that, we got some springboard money at the time. If you remember, it was out, and I designed and developed CPT programs in collaborative BIM, and that ran for a couple of years. And then out of that, the college developed a BIM policy, and the School of Multidisciplinary Technologies got formed, and then the BIM moved over there. And the masters that a lot of people now are on are going through. You know this well, Jerry, and Ryan.
Still there and
teaching. But that came out of the 2 30 credit modules that I produced in terms of collaborative BIM, and I produced the 3 modules in the certificates then, and I also designed the master's module as well. I would say the thing that makes me really kind of most proud is the fact that this year now we'll have 6 research papers delivered at the CETA BIM conference in September, all arising from that master's. And the way I designed it was to have, rather than a 20,000 word thesis which goes into a library shelf somewhere, was to produce a journal paper so that we could get the information out. So we'll have 6 papers delivered from that course 6 research papers delivered, and so it was a great way to get really good research out, disseminated out into the industry really quick, and that is paying its dues now. So absolutely delighted with that. Was it a difficult journey? Oh yeah, it was a really difficult journey. It still is. Still pockets of resistance out there, and then one of the things we're trying to do at undergraduate level is to bring in a multidisciplinary collaborative module, and that's proving to be very difficult because it just takes a lot of people to agree to come together to design the module, to give up time and everything else like that. So that's still one of the ambitions that needs to be done.
Okay. And BIM is now fundamentally part of what the architectural technologists study.
Absolutely, it's a core. We have 4 core modules, and BIM is one of those core modules. At the time there was resistance from lots of different people, and we made this big bang decision to shift CAD out and bring Revit in, and that was very difficult at the time, and I got a lot of flack from industry, a lot of flack from colleagues, and whatever, all saying that CAD was still required, and yes, it's still required, but it's not the future. And so over the years, as more and more of the graduates start to get employed in Revit or BIM-based offices, I used to flag up those figures and say we're getting there. So about 2 years ago, we think got nearly full employment of our graduates in various different offices. And again, moving the architectural technologist, provides you with a fantastic skill set, so that the architecture label is both the thing that brings students in, but it's the straitjacket when they go out, in the sense that the skill set is equally as valuable in the architectural domain as it is in the engineering domain, and particularly now the construction domain. And some of the more switched on contractors and engineers are now coming to us looking for our students because of their digital background with their core skills of building technologies. So we're under more and more pressure in terms of supplying students, and the students, unlike me in 1982, are sitting back with 3 or 4 job offers, wondering where will they go, So that's a fantastic situation. But it was the right decision and was taken at the right time, and we built up a real bank of skilled resources there in order to bring these guys up to industry and beyond industry level.
And there's a lot of different technologies involved in BIM, a lot of different software applications and software packages. How do you manage to make sure that the students get to know the right ones and they're not going off on tangents and learning software which is not directly related to their core?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's one that, again, I have come under serious pressure for over the years. And the way I look at it is that you need to become really, really skilled in one particular BIM software. In our case, it's Revit. And I'm asked, why Revit? Because it's the market leader, full stop. Simple as that. Once you learn how to operate in a 3-dimensional world, and once you learn the various different tool sets and things like that, and the processes and methodologies behind that, you'll pick up any other 3D software really, really quickly. CAD, we've left it behind. We do about a week's CAD brief training with them before they go out for their placement in 3rd year. And my view on that is that if the student goes into the office and is asked, can you do CAD? And they say no. What can you do? Do Revit. Okay, well, come over and work in this Revit job. But the first question is always asked, can you do CAD? Because they're looking for someone to work in the CAD job. But the students pick it up. They pick it up within 3 weeks. They are motoring along in CAD. All of them looking at going, what are we doing here with this? But it still is, and it's a reflection back upon the architectural profession that we're still using CAD.
Yeah, I'd agree 100% with that. And I think with the number of graduates coming out of the colleges now, BIGs, there is a sort of a critical mass happening where there are more people now who can do Revit and less people do CAD. And I think there's a real sort of sea change happened in the last probably 1-2 years.
Yeah.
We're seeing more of that happening.
Yeah. I think in terms of other softwares, we used to cover SketchUp, we used to cover Photoshop, we used to cover InDesign. we discover lots of kind of what I still refer to as legacy softwares. Really, they are. And it was my decision to say that these are not critical in terms of these. This is stuff that you can learn very quickly, very easily when you qualify, or in the summer, or anywhere else like that. Like the beauty of SketchUp is that it's so intuitive to pick up. When I mention Forma to people, they look at me, what's that? I said, well, this is the Autodesk version of SketchUp, and didn't know they had one. So we will be doing a little bit of that. I suppose the only other application that we have brought into the course, particularly in fourth year, would be the Dynamo aspect of Revit, and I think that's an essential skill for a technologist to have. But lots of other softwares can, as you say, Pat, divert you away from your main focus. And here's an interesting fact for you in terms of learning. So an architectural technologist from DIT does not go into an office until they have 500 structured hours of Revit learning.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah. That's absolutely fantastic. Because ultimately these people are architectural professionals. They're working in an architectural world. The tools they use, are just that. They're just tools. Whether it's Revit or whatever they happen to use, they are just tools. Ultimately, they need to understand buildings. They need to understand the technologies that are required, and the standards that are required to build a building.
Absolutely. The core learning is the building technologies, is the construction technologies, is building performance, is building materials. You cannot do a BIM properly unless you understand those. I think a lot of people get fooled into that. I'll give you 4 definitions of BIM: building information modelling, building information management, better information management, and building imagery modelling.
All of those which quite really realistically apply.
They do apply.
Yeah,
but don't take a building imagery model as being a building information model. The two things are very different.
Yeah, but all of those are really important to understand. There is understanding the process of BIM, so how BIM works on a project, how people collaborate and share information on the project and structure information. And then there's the tools that you use, the Revit or whatever your software of choice is, for creating the information model and managing the data. Mm-hmm. And understanding that the information model is more than just the Revit model. Yeah,
there's the right way to create the model and there's the wrong way to create the model. And I would expect that our graduates going into the field, as soon as they hit the office, are able to spot the wrong way to build a model and be able to put that correct, and whoever built it the wrong way, to put them correct as well. They will be they're the information creators, and if somebody builds a model using in-place massing all over the shop, to which there's no data attached, that's where BIM gets a bad reputation, because it's not built correctly. So these guys need to be confident enough and strong enough to be able to go into an office and say, you're not doing that correctly, it needs to be done this way, because we need geometry, 3D geometry, we need materials on it, but we need data associated with that as well. And if we don't do it that way, then we're not doing our jobs correctly.
Which is a challenge, I think, for young graduates when they are going into offices first, where they're told, this is the way the office does things, and to be able to stand up and say, no, actually, this isn't the most efficient way of doing things.
With this,
spend an extra day, and we'll, save weeks on what we're doing.
Yeah, well, that is what the new architectural technologist is. When I qualified in 1982, I was an architectural technician, and I was in there to service the architects in terms of drawing production. What you have now is a different ballgame altogether. Now, that whole profession, that profession has developed over those last kind of 35, 36 years. And these guys are now level 8. They're academically equivalent to their engineering, architectural and surveying colleagues. And they're coming out with that kind of confidence behind them as well, in terms of that this is my business. And I think that kind of leads us on to a very interesting discussion in terms of where architecture is going. And I do a lot of research, a lot of reading, and reading up on the way surveying has developed over the years and the way engineering has developed over the years, and how each of those professions has gone into specialisms. So you'll have your civil, who is your general, civil engineer is your general practitioner, if you like, but you've got your structural, who's a who's a specialist, you're a mechanical electrical specialist. You went to surveying, they're all specialists within that as well. And I think architecture is going down this road as well. I think it is breaking up into the design specialist and the technical design specialist. And that is due to two things, due to the progression of the architectural technology and the education of that, but also due to the architect's reluctance in terms of getting involved in the nitty-gritty, into the technical aspect of putting buildings together, but also all the requirements that are required now in terms of U values, in terms of design, in terms of hygrothermal properties, in terms of all of these things which are very, very technical. They are happy to design, and they're brilliant at that, and that is absolutely necessary. But our business is taking us towards the technical end of architecture as well. We need a specialist in that, and that's what the architectural technologist is.
Do you see the architectural technologist's role would actually splinter more than it is at the moment into different specialities?
It has done, Pat, already. Yeah. We've already got our information managers. Yeah. We've got our facade designers. We've got there are guys specialising in thermal bridging, in energy efficiency design. So there is whole sorts of other areas of splits happening there as well, all sitting upon their very good level 8 honours architectural technology degree, but developing into specialist areas there too.
Fantastic. Interesting, you mentioned about the development of the architectural technologist, so I'd be interested a little about the architectural technologist register and the work you've been doing in that space as well. Yeah,
well, this is the culmination of. I've been at this, I'd say, for a good 40 years now at this point, But 40 years ago, the technician was not ready to take his place amongst the professionals. They were extremely good at what they did, but they weren't ready. But that was 40 years ago. So look at these guys now. They are absolutely ready and are already sitting at the table as an equal member with their peers in the design architects, within the engineers, surveyors and the construction managers, people like that. And what all of those other professions have is a route to professionalism. And what the architectural technologist doesn't have is that route to professionalism. And the ATR, which the Architectural Technologist Register, is hopefully going to provide that route to professionalism. And a lot of people get confused in terms of the argument for the ATR, and they would see it as technologists taking over design certifier roles. But as I've explained to you, they go in so many diverse different directions that only a small percentage want to do that, want to provide full services to the industry and to the public. In order to do that, they need to have need to be given the assigned certifier role to do that. But for me, what is behind the Architectural Technologist Register is the recognition. It's parity of esteem. It's equality in terms of your seat at the table with the other professions, and that you are recognised as a professional, and that to me, and that society recognise you as a professional as well, and that to me is the most important thing about the ATR. So due to tremendous work done by the Chartered Institute of Architectural Technology, supported by lots of people here in Ireland, negotiations opened up with the department around 2 or 3 years ago. We've had 2 or 3 ministers since then, but it has reached the point where the current minister has told CIAT to organise. They've moved their voluntary register now to a shadow register, and they've accepted that the MCIAT qualification is the bar that has been set for entry onto the register. Now that's fantastic. That is brilliant. So there's an organisation there who are absolutely 100% wholehearted supporting this. They have a qualification which supports that. The legislation in terms of setting up the ATR is complex. It's the same for the surveyors and it's the same for the engineers, are slightly different, and the same for the architects. So there's boards to be populated in terms of codes of conduct boards and entry boards and all sorts of things like that. So there's still a good bit of work to do, but the signals are there, is correct. All that it needs now is a full force support from all the architectural technologists here in this country. And we've been a bit lackadaisical over the years, perhaps because there wasn't a roadmap there, and perhaps because there were certain other organisations who were promising things that didn't come to pass. But now it's pretty clear that there is a route and there is a road, and what it needs now is support. And I think that would be fantastic if that came about in the next year or two.
And how do you think you can drum up that support?
We've been doing that through social media. I run the Architectural Technology in Ireland forum on LinkedIn, over 1,000 members there. Been pushing it that way, but you can't blast messages like that. You really have to start getting into the offices now and saying, lunchtime meeting, are you in support of this? If you are, sign this here now and let's post it off and get it done.
And if anybody listening wants to find out more about the ATO, where do they?
It's on it's www.architecturaltechnologistregister.ie, and all the information you need to know is on that.
So we wanted to talk about blockchain and your thoughts around blockchain and how that might apply to the architectural industry, I suppose, the construction industry, particularly the architectural technologists.
Yeah, well, it's more of an industry thing, Pat. So blockchain is kind of a research area of mine, and how I came to it is part of the story of blockchain. So I'm researching a PhD at the moment, and one of the things that I'm very interested in is collaboration and how people work and how they work together and how they don't work together, what works and what doesn't work. And one of the areas that became very to the fore was this idea of trust within our industry. And trust on a lower level works quite well, but trust amongst firms, particularly when there's contracts involved and all sorts of things like that, is difficult. So I tried to find a trust model within our industry that I could hang some research onto, and there was nothing there. So I started to look outside of our design and construction industry, and came across this thing called blockchain, and noticed that the language was very interesting. It was very synchronous with the language that we use in terms of collaboration. So trust, collaboration, working together, all those sorts of things started to pique my interest. So I jumped in and started to read more and more and more and more about it. But as I was reading more and informing myself, it became really obvious to me that there were synergies between the blockchain technology and our BIM technology. Now, nobody else in the world had been looking at this, and so I started to get really kind of excited about it. I started to pick some references from Grant Thornton in Spain. For some reason, there was a guy looking at it down there. There was another guy over in Seattle that produced some papers and some talks on it as well. And but nobody had seen that direct connection between the BIM model and the blockchain, and what blockchain can bring to BIM and BIM can bring to blockchain. So I was waiting for ethics approval to come through on my PhD, and I said, here, come on, I'm going to jump into this and write a paper on it. So I wrote a paper. I contacted a colleague of mine, the guy over in Seattle, Dan Robles, and Dan kindly agreed to chip in and do some work on the paper with me. And I presented that at the, I think it was at CETA. It was at one of the CETA conferences. Well, that was the very first paper in the world that put together BIM and blockchain. Blockchain previous to that had been taken hold in terms of financial industries, insurance industries, all that kind of fintech and all that area, and there was great progression starting to be made within that. So as a result of that paper, it's been downloaded nearly 3,000 times at this point all over the world, and I've had lots of people wanting to talk to me about it. So it's piqued an interest. So what are the synergies between the two? And it's basically what's in the middle is trust. So if we had a mechanism whereby you and I, even if we didn't particularly like each other, or even if we were on different sides of the country or something like that, but if we wanted to collaborate true collaboration on the basis of a shared goal, if we had something that could scaffold that trust, that could be visual so that you could see that I'm trusting you and you could see that you're trusting me, very interesting things start to happen. So that's what blockchain does. Blockchain is a mechanism that provides a facility to record value transactions. That's basically what it is. Value transactions. Value transactions could be sharing of data between you and me, or it could be taking a whole model and sharing it with me or something like that. Value transactions happen hundreds of times every day on the site. And but one of the difficulties would be if you shared a model with me and I want to change your model, you'd be pretty annoyed about it, particularly if you didn't find out for a month later or something like that, to find that your information wasn't correct or whatever else, which we know has happened. But if the other property of blockchain is consensus, so you've got this mechanism to record value transaction. You've got a consensus mechanism, which is basically me and you saying, do we agree that this is the current state of our project, the current state of our model? And you go, yeah, I agree, right. So we're going to take that information and we're going to lock it away and we're going to put it in a block, and it becomes accessible to you and me, but it can't be changed. That is you can take that as being what we agreed at the time. So there's a foundation of trust starting to be built up there. The third element of blockchain is, to me, the most interesting and the one that a lot of people miss out on, and it is the token. It's the reward. So you're all familiar with blockchain through Bitcoin, more than likely. So blockchain is the underlying technology that drives Bitcoin. But what is a Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a reward to the person who solves a puzzle, who gets permission to gather up the transactions and put them into a block. Right? 6 years ago, Bitcoin was worth nothing. Couldn't give them away. As you know, we're up to $17,000 at one point. I think we're down to 5 or 6 or something like that now. And that's just intrinsic value. People collect all sorts of things, but people wanted to collect Bitcoins as a way of being able to transact, again, value transactions as well. It was a way of anonymously being able to conduct business too, so that we could, you could agree to sell me something and we pay for it in Bitcoin, so the exchange is anonymized because it's all hidden behind cryptography and hashing and all sorts of things like that. And that scared the pants off banks in the world, because they made their money through putting on extra charges for every little transaction that went and happened. But getting back to the Bitcoins and getting back to the token, to me the greatest property that blockchain has, the single greatest property, is that it has the propensity to change human behavior. And the last technology that came along that had that same that could do something similar was the World Wide Web. And when that started, we all looked at it and go, I don't know if you remember the little box that you had, and you connect and you hear the bing, 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 and you go, boom, yeah, we're on the internet, yay, yay.
I do, not everybody in the room.
Yeah, well, most of us do, I think.
But the question after that was, I'm on the internet, what do I do now?
Yeah, what's next?
So there was no applications built onto the internet that we could particularly go into, So blockchain is at that stage where it's starting to develop. You could say blockchain 1 would have been Bitcoin, blockchain 2 is kind of Ethereum, blockchain 3, so it's consistently developing in the way that the World Wide Web developed. And I think it is going to have a huge impact in not just design and construction, but in other industries as well. But I think it has huge potential to influence human behaviour within design and construction. And my God, don't we need that? People call for a culture change within our industry. And the culture change is basically trust and collaboration. That's what it is. All the rest are just bits and pieces. If you and I can't work together, then no tools or no other fancy materials or anything else like that is going to happen unless you and I can work together in a trustworthy way of doing things.
And the industry is set up at the moment to be confrontational.
It's set up, absolutely. That's it. So we have to start thinking differently. We have to start thinking radically outside the box, and that's where blockchain will come into its own in terms of providing a facility for people who are interested in doing that and interested in changing. So if you can imagine a situation where we did work together and I liked the way you worked with me and I was in a position to award you tokens to say thanks very much for your efforts on this project. I'm giving you 100 whatever it is AEC coin tokens, and they might be worth 2 cents, but they're worth something to you because you can show that to somebody else to say, this guy, this is my reputation here. I've got 100 tokens because I've worked well with him. And you start to work with somebody else and they give you 50 tokens. And you're starting to build up a token of value here. Now somebody says, do you remember we worked together and it was really, really good? Is there any chance you could give me back 50 tokens for the work that I've done for you or something like that? And you start getting an interesting exchange of value there in terms of you can say, no, you were rubbish. I'm not giving you anything, But you say, actually, you were really good. So let's work out something here. So it's a little bit theoretical, but the intention is there to reward somebody for their collaborative work. And again, I think that has huge potential as well.
Well, all of these technologies start off being difficult for people to access, and then they become easier and easier and easier. I mean, you mentioned Dynamo earlier. Dynamo, when it first came out, sort of computer programmers almost could do it, and now anybody can do it. So blockchain will come there. It'll be in the background of what we do. We won't all need to know exactly what blockchain is or how it works. We don't all need to know how Dynamo code works.
We'll drive the car. We don't need to know how the engine works. We'll drive the car. But Dublin is a hub of blockchain activity, a world hub of blockchain activity. Really interesting stuff going on. Deloitte have their European blockchain lab here in Dublin. A few of the other financial institutes have it here as well. So here's a new job that didn't exist. 4 years ago even? A blockchain developer? There you go.
Trusting people is really important, but trusting the information as well, and that's one of the problems, particularly with existing buildings. There's information existing about existing buildings, but you can't trust it.
Yeah.
So if you get involved in an existing building, the first thing you do is you go and recreate all the information again because you don't trust what's there.
Yeah.
So if there's a mechanism by which we can create information that's trustworthy.
Well, here's we're myself and one of my master's students, Alan O'Reilly. We're presenting a paper now at CETA in September. And Alan's taken the idea of incentivizing AEC teams using BIM+Blockchain. And he's actually gone and created using a Dynamo script. He's created a blockchain using a Dynamo script in which heat information from sensors in the building is recorded to the blockchain. Now that becomes really interesting because we're in this era of predictive analysis. So I don't see why a client can't come to a design team and say, I want a better than net zero building. I want a building that produces energy, not uses it. And you can say, well, we can do that for you, but we want something out of it as well. And you say, right, well, you tell me what you predict this building is going to do, and we'll measure what it actually does. And the energy that's left over, you can sell. So you've got a blockchain that has the predictive, a blockchain that has the actual. You can do a comparison of the two. Whatever residual is left over, literally you could have a pole outside of the building which will charge your electric car. And you'll go in with the phone, QR code, you'll swipe it, it'll start to deduct money from your account, which goes into the account of the client or the people who own the building or whoever's doing that, and a microcharge starts to arrive, and your excess energy is being used. So it's not being sold back to the grid, which is a difficult thing to do in Ireland, but you're selling it. So mobile phone charging, car charging, all those kind of things that we use can literally be done now with Wi-Fi now as well, so you don't have to plug it in too. But all of these value transactions that are happening are recorded in the blockchain so that there can be a distribution of value, of coinage or of real money or something like that. does that become a really interesting prospect?
Fascinating, absolutely. Hugely valuable.
Hugely valuable. So we're presenting that paper in September, and I'm excited and looking forward to that one.
So thanks, Malachy. Thanks for coming in and sharing your thoughts with us. It's fascinating.
Yeah, thanks. It's it is a fascinating area. I presented up in Belfast to a conference up there, which was packed with young people, and I said, "Gosh, I wish I was 20 years younger, because I think there's a hugely interesting and exciting future ahead." And when you look at it, Pat, it was only 40 years ago, 35 years ago, we were still on rotring pens and tracing paper. Look where we are now. Can you imagine where we're going to be in another 35 years? It's a really exciting. So architectural technology, without doubt, they are the guys that are providing the fuel for our BIM revolution, because they're taking those skills into all these offices, engineering, construction, architecture, and representing themselves extremely well. So delighted with the progress that's been made, and thanks for the opportunity to come and talk to you. Super.
Thanks, Malachy.
All right, thanks guys.